Welcome back everyone to another ESO video. Today is a massive change to tanks. Things got easier. Now, let's just bear in mind, obviously, this isn't actually live yet. This is on the current PTS, but this is their intention for the future. Lots of you may know in the past that things have been a little bit skew with people using the really awkward term called soft taunt. Now, taunt is usually a term that upsets somebody to try and entice them into reacting negatively. A soft taunt? What's that, a whisper? A mildly offensive slur? Like, you naughty person. You naughty. Is that what that is? Anyway, jokes aside. Basically, the idea was that people assumed that chains was a taunt ability. Now, let me just clear this up before we even go any further with this. There is a set in the game that does apply this. So, if you go into the reconstruction, go into banish cells, which is here, you will see very clearly that there is a set called the Tormentor. And if you read this, when you deal direct damage with a charge, leap, teleport, or pull ability, you gain a damage shield, resistance shield even, and you taunt the enemy. That was the only way to do that. Now, what the chains did, which was confusing to people, is it somehow kind of overlapped with a set-in-stone anti-troll mechanic. Now, that anti-troll mechanic is basically, sometimes in content, you might want to swap bosses or swap targets with another tank. So, technically speaking, generally how this would work is you would stab the target with one taunt, and someone would take it off you with a different taunt. That way, the enemy knew it was a different skill, and it would just swap. No problem. But if you stabbed it, then someone else stabbed it, and then they stabbed it, and then you stabbed it, and it went on and on and on and on. There weren't any differentiations in that whatsoever. Then the enemy would go, do you know what? This doesn't sound right. It wasn't if you spam taunt over and over and over, it gets immune. It doesn't get immune. It locks. But that doesn't happen for you. It only happens if someone else conflicts with it. So what they had is they had a 3-stack rule in place. This is to prevent trolling. Because you could have a DPS in your group going stab with a taunt while you're trying to contain the enemy or control aggro, and it would be a mess. So they allowed 3 of the same type to stack before the boss said, you know what, I'm going to stay with this target now. Anyway, they've altered that and made that now 5. So in situations where you're not too sure of the mechanic and you don't actually have a troll in your group and you're trying to swap, that gives you a little bit more forgiveness. Now, the chains, how did that work? That did not taunt. What that would do is if you were the first one to pull it, you would have obviously pissed it off first. So it's going to hit you 9 times out of 10. Not always, because any experienced tank knows when you pull something, it runs off again because you haven't aggroed it or taunted it properly. But what it did do is it also had the anti-troll mechanic. So what it would do is you chain it, somebody else chains it. You chain it, somebody else chains it. After 3, it's had enough. It's not going to listen anymore to any chains until that period of time is over. However, you could still stab it. Anyway, what they've done is they've changed that. They want people to allow for help or utility in their group. They want chains to still be utilized by other members in the group, not just the tank, which has always been a thing in coordinated groups, but not so much in some that aren't. Now, what they've done is they've made it so that when you chain something, you do taunt it, but it's an official soft taunt. We're going to actually take that term and use it. Fuck it. It's an official soft taunt. Now, it is an actual taunt, but it can be taken over. But it can't overlap a hard taunt. We're going to have to use it because it's already a fucking thing. Yes, I know, it's really dumb. But this is the difference. So if I stab this target, you can see the taunt timer on there. It's a black background with a shield on it, which is broken in half. If I stab it again, redid the taunt. Great. Now, if I try and chain it, I will just chain it in, no problem, but doesn't upset the taunt, doesn't change it. Nothing. The only way to change it is to stab again, or use a ranged taunt, or use an ice taunt. Now, how does this work when you use chains first? The idea is, if the tank pulls first, you will get aggro, and you now have really good control over the room. But if someone else gets it, they will still taunt it. A further chain won't overlap it, but you can run in and stab it. So what does that mean? That means that for tanks, you can go yoink, 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 Got all of those. They are next to you now. They can't be chained. They're stun immune. And they're all taunted. You don't have to pull, stab, pull, stab, pull, stab, pull, stab. They are all yours. But at the same time, nobody else's chain can override it. Also, if someone does pull before you, you can take the aggro off them with that. That is a sustainability alteration indefinitely. Being able to pull an enemy and taunt it instantly without the use of a set is going to change the game for tanks. Imagine being a Dragon Knight right now and you're using your DK chains and you pull, 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 pull. At the moment on live, you'd have to put the root on and then you'd have to stab them all individually to make sure you maintain aggro because they will run off. Now they won't. Pull, 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 done. The only thing you need to taunt for is a debuff. No one can take the aggro off you with a further chain, although they can still pull it. And no one can do anything negative to that at all unless they have one of these. Or the range taunt, or the ice taunt. So that is an absolute game changer. Again, look very carefully. The timer for the taunt cannot be altered by another chain. It can only be altered by a legitimate hard taunt, which gives you freedom and other people control. Because in this scenario, for example, if you have a ranged taunt on, which we'll demonstrate very quickly, and you were, say, a ranged tank, you're an ice tank, you're in a position where you can't really move that much because it will be too risky and it will alter the tide of the fight. It will move stuff into places you don't want to be in. So you want to stay here. Okay, so you're range taunt him, and him, and him, and him. And then you can have your friend here go yoink, 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 and pull them into position for you if you need to step forward. That, of course, you could argue you could just do that in the first place, but what about your resources? One stam, one mag, depending on your class and setup. There's situations where that could actually be really, really useful. A prime example of that is if you are in more of Lorcage. You're up against the blue boss. You've taunted the ranged targets, the blue ones, but you can't quite pull them in because you don't quite reach. One of your friends can stand here and chain that to their feet, slightly away from you, but enough to bring it in to be able to be damaged, and you've still got the aggro. Whereas before, you would pull it in. Now, with the new rules, it would hit you only. So, big, big game changer there to aggro and to the chain skill itself. If you want to read up on that, obviously you can see here that this has actually changed. It does damage and it taunts. But again, I hate the term because it's so backwards, but it's a softer version of the hard taunt. So the hard taunt being the undaunted skill line, the sword and board skill line, and of course the destruction staff skill line. If you're using an ice staff, you've got clench here, which will obviously change to this one. Those ones are set in stone. They can overwrite, they can be recast over and over, and they will still maintain aggro. If you swap with another tank with the same skill up to 5 times, that's when the target will stay on the last one it was on until the timer has run out. And when it comes to chains, you cannot steal aggro with a chain. You can only gain it on the initial cast. If it's already controlled, chain it all day long as much as you want, you're good. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Hopefully that clears up some of the mess over time that has been a little bit confusing, but they've now set in stone some very clear rules for that. And again, for those of you that do tank, regardless of how many times you want to argue about who stole aggro and who didn't, no one can steal aggro off you with a chain if you've taunted it. No one can steal aggro off you with a chain after you've chained it. And your resources will thank you because you can actually use 1 skill now rather than 2. Chain it, done, unless you want to debuff it. Of course, there's other ways to do that too. Thank you for watching. I hugely appreciate support. If you are not subscribing on YouTube, obviously hit that button. It is free. And if you want to help support outside the channel, there are some links in the info section for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, the website XynodeGaming.com, and there's loads of other stuff out there as well. Put Xynode in Google. You'll find stuff and things. In the meantime, have an awesome week, and I'll see you in the next video where we're going to be talking about the new Sork Shield, which is OP as fuck. Bye-bye.